For some context, this actually happened to one of the teachers that used to be in elementary school. We'll call her by Liz. Now, Liz Smith happened to be maybe in her mid-30s at the time of this story. I can't remember what year exactly it took place in, but I believe it was sometime either in 2006 or 7. It was the fall around that time, and Liz was working as one of the elementary school teachers. She used to teach grade 3, but now she decided to teach grade 4 one year. However, though, she was camping with her husband at the time of the story, since she wanted to do something before it got too cold to do some stuff, that being camping. She always enjoyed camping sometime during the summer months, but decided to give fall camping a try. Her husband and her left the city around sometime after school hours when Liz got home from school. Then her husband and her took a trip all the way up to a really rural area, probably at some sort of park. When they got there, all the leaves were pretty much on the ground, but although some trees still had some tree leaves changing colors and some had already started to fall, some were even very bare. This was honestly one of the most beautiful sights they could ever imagine. However, they set up their trailer and ended up doing their own thing. However, the next day was when things got really weird. But before we get to that, this is when things started to get really strange. As Liz and her husband were setting up camp, Liz suddenly got this really strange feeling, as if they were being watched. She honestly didn't know really what it was, but something in her mind were telling her that something or someone was watching them. She honestly told her husband about that, but her husband brushed it off as her being paranoid. Okay, maybe she was a little paranoid, but she knew for a fact that something didn't feel right. But however, she ended up thinking maybe she was just hallucinating and decided to go to bed sometime after they had dinner and sat around the fire for a while. However, in the middle of the night, Liz ended up waking up to use the bathroom, but when she came back to her trailer, she ended up hearing that there was some leaves crunching, as if someone was walking around. Liz honestly thought that maybe it could have been a wild animal, so she ended up brushing it off, made sure the trailer door was locked tight, and went to bed. It wasn't until the next morning when she and her husband started walking around the trail. They were going for a hike after breakfast, when all of a sudden they looked to see that it was really foggy up ahead. It was a little damp and rainy, so maybe that might have been it. But Liz looked up. There were actually 2 people walking ahead of them. Thinking that they might have been maybe other campers, she waved to them and said, "Hey!" The 2 figures then looked at Liz and then all of a sudden took off running. Of course, Liz and her husband tried to chase them, but unfortunately, they lost them by the time they got near to where they were. They ended up looking through the leaves that were covering it. They found what seemed to be 2 AK-47s. This honestly really made Liz more freaked out, knowing that these guys had guns, but why would they hide them there? Liz, along with her husband, ended up going back to their campsite and packed up. Then on the way out, they ended up reporting it to the rangers, and the guns were confiscated when the police and the authorities arrived. They did a quick search of the campsite, but nothing ever became of it. Liz and her husband never went back up to those woods again, but they're still not sure if those guys were ever found or not. That was one question that they still have left unanswered for a really long time. About 4 or 5 years ago, one of my friends who happened to be going to the same high school as me, his name was Jared, and he was about 17 years old when this happened. Jared was pretty much one of the kids of one of the farmers at the time, and Jared lived in this big farm with his aunt and uncle. Now, about what happened to his parents, unfortunately, the dad ended up being mentally unstable as well as verbally and physically abusive towards his mother. Jared's mother has no intentions of doing anything much, but one day she took her stand and ended up leaving him. Jared does not know where his father is at this time, and unfortunately his mother was not financially stable to own a place, so she was ended up going on the streets for a while. So Jared's aunt and uncle were able to take him in. And the farm life was pretty nice, although why they couldn't let the mom go on to live with Jared's parent, uncle, and aunt was something else. I don't honestly remember much what happened after that, but I'm assuming that if Jared's mom did get off the streets, she was probably living at a house at the time, but probably was unstable to take Jared in a financial manner. Now, Jared and his uncle pretty much work at the same cornfield all the time. However, this was one day when Jared was home alone. His aunt and uncle had gone out to do some stuff, but unfortunately their car broke down, so they ended up staying a night at a friend's house in the city. Thus, Jared was home alone, but there was no storm or anything. He ordered himself some pizza, and everything seemed normal. However, while he was eating pizza, he ended up looking up to see that there was a figure. Now, this figure looked to be about a few feet tall. He was medium build. He ended up staring at Jared from a distance. Jared thought at first it could have been one of his friends pranking him, but it didn't resemble any of his friends wearing some clothing. This person was wearing some skinny jeans and was wearing a black hoodie, but he couldn't really see the facial features or anything. Jared thought that maybe it was just a neighbor, so he just ignored him and continued on with his dinner. It wasn't until before Jared was about to go to bed when he all of a sudden heard what seemed to be his aunt calling. "Jared? Jared, honey!" Jared ended up looking up thinking it was his aunt, but he texted his aunt and uncle asking if they were home, to which they replied with no. This honestly confused Jared, so he ended up heading outside to see what was going on. As he got outside, he took out his gun. He ended up looking around with the flashlight in hand, but didn't see anything. He ended up calling out if the person was still there, but there was no reply. He ended up looking over to see that there was some footsteps that led into the cornfield. When Jared went through the cornfield just a little bit, he saw what seemed to be a figure about maybe 15 feet away. He was above the cornfield. As paralyzed and frightening as it sounds, Jared turned around and ran back the way he came, locked the door, and ended up calling the cops. The cops eventually did come and investigate the cornfield, but they couldn't find anyone. All they knew was it was probably maybe just someone passing by, or it could have been maybe just a bear wandering around. Jared has no idea what could have happened to him if he stayed there any longer. God only knows if Jared stayed any longer, he probably would either be killed or worse. This took place just a few days ago, and or maybe just at least if not too long ago. It was something that happened to me just recently. I don't really know why, but it did. Now, this was one night when I had a really bad headache and I couldn't really sleep or had really good sleep that night. I was honestly really tossing and turning like crazy. Now, before that happened, my brother and I went to Subway to get dinner, as we decided to have dinner at Subway since we both were pretty tired and didn't feel like cooking. When my brother and I went up to get Subway, all was normal as the sky was starting to get darker. But as we were returning home, We looked over at the dumpsters behind the store plazas to see that there was a bear. Now, this was a black bear, and he was looking in the dumpster through the garbage. Since we are in an area where bears are pretty common, they will go into dumpsters and that for food. This is around the time when bears ended up eating as much as they can, since they were going to be hibernating soon. Whatever happened, my brother and I kept talking, and we were loud as we could, just in order for the bear to not follow us. However, we were proven wrong later on. I was tossing and turning, and as I was trying to sleep off the headache, I ended up hearing what seemed to be our garbage can being moved, by the sounds of garbage can being thrown around outside. I honestly had no idea what it was. I brushed it off thinking that maybe it must have been the wind, as the wind has blown our garbage can a couple times. But however, though, I ended up stepping outside just for a minute, thinking maybe someone was trying in his best to get to whatever was going on, but I couldn't really see much of what was happening. Since it was pretty dark, I couldn't see if anyone was there, and there was no trace of it, so I ended up taking something to get my headache go away, and then I just went to bed. However, the next morning, my brother said that our garbage can was opened and there was garbage all over the place. We ended up cleaning it up, but then my mom and I realized that a bear must have somehow gone into the garbage. There were teeth marks and possibly claw marks on the lid of our garbage can, thinking that it could have been trying to get at the food. My mom and I, along with my brother, came to the conclusion that the bear must have followed my brother and I home that night when we brought Subway home, and somehow he must have knew where we were. I have my garbage can inside my house now, just only for the time being until the bear no longer goes into the garbage. However, the one thing that really confuses me was, how was he able to get into the garbage can with the animal-proof latches on? That still questions me to this very day. This happened in October of 2018. It was during the time I was working at a riding stable. This is by far the freakiest thing that has ever happened. It started off with me mucking out stalls, taking horses in and out of pastures, etc. Around 12:30 p.m., my mom came to pick me up from work. Since I work at 8:30 a.m., I work for the morning hours and have the rest of the day off. As I got in my van with my mom, she said that she drove past a cornfield a few streets down from the barn. What she saw while on my way to get me was a clown. I asked her what the clown looked like. She gave me a brief description of what it looked like. The clown looked like Pennywise from It, the 2017 remake, my mom said. I couldn't get a clear view of it, but that's from what I remembered what he looked like. As soon as my mom said that, I questioned her about what street she saw the clown at, when my mom told me that the cornfield was not far from the trail. I knew what she was talking about. The trail my mom was talking about used to be a train track many years ago, but ever since the train track was removed, people used it for many purposes, like hiking, dog walking, dirt biking, etc. My mom wanted to take the trail that was by the cornfield, where she saw the clown. I was going to tell her that it wasn't a good idea, but she insisted that we do need to take my dog there. My dog was a German Shepherd Golden Retriever mix, so he was about a few months old at the time. He wasn't really big, but he was always rambunctious so much that we needed to walk him every day. It was a pain in the ass, to say the least, but fun too. My mom drove down the road where she took me and from work and riding. It was a quiet road, and it never got busy pretty much. When my mom got to the cornfield, where the trail was, she parked her van and me and her took the dog out. We couldn't see the clown, but I wonder if he went off to hide or something. I didn't want to look for the clown, so we started walking down the trail. It was surrounded by trees with leaves changing colors. It was fall, which it was my mom's favorite season. As we walked down the trail, we let my dog run to do his own thing. After a few feet away from the van, I noticed a dirt bike on the ground. Upon getting closer, I looked to see that the bike had been there for a while. Unsure if the bike was stolen or not, I noticed some damage was done to it. The tires were slashed and the chain was broken. The seat was so ripped. I also looked to see if anyone was around, but I couldn't see anyone. Thinking whoever left the bike was going to take a piss or something, my dog was staring something in the wilted cornfield. I walked up to my dog and grabbed him by the leash to be safe. When I took a hold of the leash, I looked up at the wilted cornfield. Winter was approaching within a few weeks, so it was normal to see most of the cornfields wilted in the area. I looked to see a figure in the cornfield. That was what my dog was looking at. My mom was a couple of feet behind me, so she wasn't far behind. I could see that the figure looked like a clown my mom saw earlier. He looked to be about 6 feet tall. He was medium build, and he did look like the clown my mom described it to be. I wasn't sure why he was standing in the wilted cornfield, but I had no idea what his plans were. As I stared at the clown figure, it turned around to face me. I could see the clown had an axe in his right hand, and that was when shit hit the fan. To the right of the clown, I could see at least 3 or 4 men dressed in black, about a couple feet away from the clown. I was nearly pissing myself, as I wondered about why those men were there. If it was private property or something, why couldn't they just have told us to leave? The clown was slowly beginning to walk towards me and my dog. I almost froze in fear at this point. Suddenly, out of nowhere, there was a blood-curdling scream from somewhere in the forest. It sounded like a woman was screaming, and I lost my shit right then and there, so I booked it down the way I came with my dog, not looking back. When I caught up with my mother, I told her to run, and we do so. Despite my mom having breathing problems, we ran all the way back towards our van. As soon as we got into our van, we looked to see if the clown was behind us. There was no one following us, but we didn't want to stay to find out. My mom drove down the road until we got to our hometown, looking occasionally for any vehicle that might be suspicious. When we got back, we reported the clown incident to the police, and they went to the location where we found the clown. Shortly after that, we headed home without any hesitation. The next day, my mom got a phone call from the police when she picked me up from work, and what they said sent chills down my spine. My mom told me that the clown with 3 or 4 men were luring people down the trail we went to. They had found a few bodies of people, one of them being a 6-year-old girl. I was sickened by what the police found, knowing those men were waiting for me and possibly my mom and dog in the field. If my dog hadn't alerted me and my mom about that clown and his men, I wouldn't be alive today. Let this be a warning. If you see anyone wearing a clown mask in the forest or cornfield, run away from it. Don't stay with the clown if you want to stay alive.